Fantasia is the third Disney animated film, produced at the same time as their second film, Pinocchio, and released later on in the same year, 1940. Unlike the previous films, Fantasia is not a single narrative. It's an anthology of 8 animated shorts set to pieces of classical music during a live-action concert conducted by Leopold Stokowski. The film is an homage to orchestral music, and it really pushed the boundaries of technology at the time to amaze audiences. Walt Disney intended Fantasia to be a series and to come out with a new one every few years, but audiences of the time didn't properly appreciate it, and it bombed. It wasn't until later decades that audiences came to appreciate it. It got one sequel in 1999, ironically called Fantasia 2000, and plans for a third film fell apart, but at this point Disney intends to release a live-action version of the Night on Bald Mountain segment. To me, Fantasia is the Star Wars of Disney movies. Absolutely awesome, unfortunately not as feminist. The film starts with people setting up the concert. Master of Ceremonies Deems Taylor introduces the film. The first segment is a synesthetic abstract depiction of music, specifically Toccata and Fugue in D minor by Johann Sebastian Bach. Nothing relevant to comment on there. What is notable is that the musicians are almost entirely male, save for the one woman on the harp. The men get instruments characterized as masculine, while the harp is characterized as feminine for its soft, graceful sound. So a woman has to play that. The orchestra of Fantasia 2000 contrasts this with the diversity that we would expect of 1999. The next segment is an interpretation of the Nutcracker Suite by Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky. It starts with the dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy, in which extremely feminine fairies usher in spring with magic wands, which they use to add pretty sparkles of dewdrops to flowers and make them bloom. A lot of the segments have characters symbolizing conductors, and the fairies play this part in this segment. It's just slightly more power than that demonstrated by previous female protagonist Snow White, but still firmly rooted in the domestic realm. In their delicate beauty, they're very traditionally feminine, the only role available to a female protagonist back then, similar to the harp player. The fairies crash into each other and accidentally animate some mushrooms, who launch into the Chinese dance portion of the Nutcracker Suite. The mushrooms are racist caricatures of Chinese people with conical hats, slanted eyes, stiff body language, and frequent bowing. What's interesting is that Disney actually removed a section of Fantasia that is racist against African Americans. The historian in the audio commentary describes the removed portion as harmful and unnecessary to include in the film when the offensive material exists in books where it can be studied in an academic context. He has no qualms about describing the mushrooms designed to evoke Chinese people, using the outdated term Oriental. This says to me that Disney cares more about not offending African Americans than Asian Americans, and that they decided to say something about the anti-black racism being bad, but don't understand racial theory enough to know why something would be considered offensive. This is consistent with them not releasing Song of the South on home video, while defending their use of the crows in Dumbo. Sometimes Disney is pressured to redact content, but they don't understand why. They don't have a good theory about it. There's then a bit with flowers landing in a river for the dance of the flutes. They morph into shapes evocative of ballerinas. It goes back to the feminine beauty thing. Like with Snow White, it's about admiring beauty more than character. Compare these characters to Tamatoa from 2016's Moana. Like Snow White and the flower ballerinas, Tamatoa's beauty is a principle-defining character trait. However, it's only framed as one trait. While the character's overall personality can be appreciated as a vain crab monster who is fun to watch because he sings charismatically. While he may be attractive for being shiny and multicolored, the scene isn't framed to have the viewer consume him as an object of beauty alone. But the flowers are.
I'd rather be shiny like a treasure from a sunken pirate wreck.
This intensifies with the next part. Goldfish performing the Arabian dance, with the over-sexualized caricatures of Arab women. Walt Disney specifically wanted the goldfish to be lazy, extremely feminine, and sexy. He thought goldfish naturally move like they're doing a belly dance, and could be styled into sexy women. We see sexy goldfish appearing and then ducking out of view like the fish are flirting with us. According to the commentary, this was to evoke what I assume are exploitative Western documentaries of Islamic cultures that would show Muslim women in veils peeking out from windows, seeing cameras pointed at them, and ducking back inside. Someone who respects women might think, hey, don't film people who don't want to be filmed. Walt Disney, however, was like, hey, that's so sexy how the sexy Arab ladies come into view and then flirtatiously duck away in alarm. As a result, this part is highly voyeuristic, encouraging the male audience to appreciate the beauty of women who do not want to be seen by them. Violation of women's privacy is put forward as sexy because these women are so exotic. It'd be bad if it were just some fantastic scenario with fish, but these fish are clearly supposed to evoke Middle Eastern concubines in a harem, so it's an example of real-world Western exotification and dehumanization of Muslim Arab women. It's similar to Jiminy Cricket's ogling women framing the narrative as part of the male gaze, but it's worse because of the violating nature of this gaze. This intrusive framing, holding female beauty for male consumption by default, with women's consent not required, with women surprised at being ogled, only a special flavor of sexual display, is very rapey. Walt Disney didn't come up with it. I'm sure he was only analyzing what makes something sexy based on what he observed in the surrounding media. But it promotes a rapey idea. Fantasia is the product of rape culture, and it serves to propagate it. Walt Disney might be comparable to Donald Trump. He had a similar narrow view of the positive portrayal of women as existing within their ability to impress men with their beauty. Making adult male dwarves fall in love with a young girl shows disrespect for age boundaries. The sexy blue fairy is kind of like a Playboy model showing up in a family film. This particular display of sexuality, where women fish are attractive because the male camera gaze intrudes into their private abode, where they don't want to be seen, is similar to Donald Trump bragging about his exploits and walking in on the women's dressing room.
I'll tell you the funniest is that I'll go backstage before a show.
Yes.
And everyone's getting dressed and ready and everything else. And, no men are anywhere. And I'm allowed to go in because I'm the owner of the pageant and therefore I'm inspecting it. I'm inspecting. I want to make sure that
You're like
everything
a doctor.
is good.
You're there.
Yeah, the dress. Is everyone okay? They're standing there with no clothes. Is everybody okay? And you see these incredible looking women. And so I sort of get away with things like that. But
Feminists criticizing Disney is the same struggle as criticizing Trump. We're fighting the same long-lived dragon. There are then 3 sexy silver goldfish who shyly peek out through a curtain of coral and flirtatiously beckon the viewer onward. We see sexy pink goldfish doing a Busby Berkeley dance. 3 black goldfish then replace them and unveil a super sexy white goldfish. Given the racial tones of Fantasia and other Disney films, I'm inclined to interpret a racist aspect to this scene. They may not literally represent black people in the manner of the blackfish from The Little Mermaid, but there is a sense of the dark-skinned women being inadequately pretty next to the light-skinned woman, not so different from the removed section. She dances seductively in an extended sequence, while the black goldfish dance in subordinate roles, veiling her again at the conclusion. This scene is just racist and sexist trash. Next is the Russian dance with more flower people. There are assertive male Russian flowers who do the most, and then there are unobtrusive female dance partners. It's a little annoying to have the women so unremarkable, but at least it's no Arabian dance. We return to the fairies for the Waltz of the Flowers. These fairies are autumn fairies, and release milkweed seeds that are ballerinas. The milkweed seeds dance around in the air and have our attention, but they don't have the same level of character as the goldfish, which works for me. They don't have to be the stars, per se, but they should be something other than props. Notably, the milkweed seeds all appear to be white women. Then we come to the winter fairies, who ice skate as they usher in winter. Finally, we get Snowflake Fairies. All of the fairies have the same value. It's nice that they're powerful protagonists. I just wish they weren't admired for their beauty and cuteness. That kind of thing is what kept women down back then, forced into this role where they're only respected for physical attractiveness and ineffectual demeanor. And then we have everybody's favorite, the Sorcerer's Apprentice segment. There's a powerful sorcerer named Yensid, which is Disney spelled backwards, and he has this magic pointy hat. Yensid is an author insert of Walt Disney. There is a young apprentice, played by Mickey Mouse, who has the hard job of fetching water from the well and depositing it in Yensid's magic pool thing. Mickey wants to do magic, but has to do the hard labor for the time being. He pauses to watch Yensid make a scary bat image out of smoke, which he then transforms into a pretty butterfly. When I was a kid, I was struck by how he seems to go outside gender roles, but now I think that it's just modern-day homophobia restricts traditional masculinity to a greater degree than in 1940. This is similar to Bambi allowing a respected straight male character to be named Flower. You can also see a difference in the beauty Yensid is allowed to create as a man versus the feminine beauty of the fairies. Yensid puts away his toys and goes to bed. Mickey figures that when the cat's away, the mouse will play. He takes the hat and animates a broom into a golem to serve him. Mickey shows the broom how to do his job, and then he falls asleep in the master's chair. He dreams of great power, being able to command the stars and the waves. He wakes up to find the broom kept going without stop, even though the place was flooded. He can't stop it and ends up chopping it to pieces. But each piece becomes its own broom, and the situation gets wildly out of control. Yensid returns and saves his foolish apprentice. Mickey sheepishly hands back the hat and broom to his master, and Yensid swats him on the back with the broom. Given that Mickey is characterized as a young boy in oversized robes, this seems to me to be another thematic depiction of corporal punishment. Similar to an unfinished scene in Snow White, in which Dopey is spanked in order to get him to cough up a couple of things that he swallowed, continuing Disney ageism. The apprentice character was originally even supposed to be Dopey. The next segment is an interpretation of the Rite of Spring by Igor Stravinsky, depicting the beginning of the Earth to the end of the dinosaurs. We are told that it is totally scientifically accurate. It's not. Don't trust it. Though somewhat anthropomorphized, the animals are mostly just treated as animals in nature and do not have gendered characteristics. Nevertheless, Walt Disney referred to the T-Rex and Stegosaurus as male, exemplifying how maleness is the default. These characters could be anything, but according to the Disney canon, they're properly described with male pronouns. Taking death of the author into account, though, we can say that the lack of gendered characteristics makes them without known gender, and thus giving the whole sequence neutral feminist value. There's then an intermission and an anthropomorphized soundtrack during the wait. The soundtrack is represented as a vertical line. He's given a distinctive personality and seems to convey emotions, and he's very cute. However, there's no good reason for him to be a him. He's a line that represents music. He doesn't even have eyes. Of course, Disney has a long history of anthropomorphizing inanimate objects. The fact that they give this line personhood and then call it male illustrates the patriarchal philosophy that says that maleness is the default state, and that femaleness is something special, needs a reason to be applied. They'll make female characters like the fairies and the fish, specifically to serve the function of being attractive to the male viewer. But when they animate a random line, they make it male by default. The next segment is an interpretation of the Pastoral Symphony by Ludwig van Beethoven, depicting characters from Greek and Roman mythology. The first part has pastel-colored unicorn and Pegasus calves, and fawn kids playing.
I used to wonder what friendship could be.
These characters are almost certainly all male, so it's striking that some of them have pink fur. In modern American culture, the color pink is almost exclusively feminine, but this idea was not adopted until after World War II. The reasons for which are unclear, but seem to involve the interaction of American and German aesthetics. America would not enter World War II until the following year in 1941, so Fantasia holds the historical curiosity of pink being considered masculine. In the Pegasus family, the father is black and the mother is white, which is classic color symbolism. A lot of classic European art uses the motif of light women and dark men. I imagine that's what they're going for with the parents of this family. The next part focuses on the Centaurs. It starts with women with pastel-colored hair bathing in a river. This part is very voyeuristic, evocative of classic art pieces that rich guys would have made for pornography. We're just supposed to admire the nude beauty as they happily do things, without thinking that any men would see them.
No men are anywhere. You see these incredible looking women.
The male viewer gets a voyeuristic thrill at admiring women who don't want to be seen, as with the shy goldfish. One of the women walks out, and we see that she is actually a centaur, or a centaurette. Another case of maleness being seen as the default. The centaurettes put on makeup and start making themselves look pretty for the centaur boys coming up, some being assisted by cherubs. There are many shots of sexualized centaurettes presented for the male gaze. There's one shot of a white centaurette with lavender hair and wreaths of roses on. Her hoof is raised and moving around as to suggest that she's doing something with it that is obscured by the tight shot. Looks like you're looking at something. This was once a very racist scene that has now been censored. There was once a young half-donkey black centaurette named Sunflower. Sunflower is a type of racist caricature called a pickaninny, a stupid and inept black child whose perceived racial characteristics are exaggerated for the purpose of humor. Sunflower is here presented as an inept servant of the older white women centaurettes. When one of the centaurettes messes up her work, she adopts the stance of a stereotypical sassy black woman. It's very cringeworthy. In 1969, the character was very carefully edited out, and now many people don't realize that this character even existed at all. The only video that exists outside of the Disney Vault is from a television broadcast from 1963. I think that censoring it on modern DVDs is a bad idea. Disney should acknowledge it as racist, which they can do at the beginning of the movie, like Warner Brothers does with their racist stuff. They can say, "This is the terrible racism of 1940. Modern Disney does not endorse it. Here it is as it was presented to audiences of the time. Check out our special features where black historians put it into context." As it is now, they're just trying to hide a blemish on their family-friendly reputation and continue their cult of personality presenting Walt Disney as this perfect human being. A significant problem there is that other parts of the movie are still racist, like with the mushrooms and the goldfish. And these are left uncensored, in big part because you can't cut them out without ruining big segments of the movie. If they're going to show the mushrooms, why not Sunflower? Why not put all of the racist parts out there to make it clear that Disney has nothing to hide, and then apologize for the whole thing? Take responsibility for it. Another problem is that censoring Sunflower means that Disney removes a black character from the Disney canon. She's a racist caricature, but she's also the first female black character in a Disney animated film. And Disney doesn't have a lot of black characters at all. If she was kept around in canon, there would be the potential to migrate her to another Disney show and update her to be less offensive. Similar to Figaro from Pinocchio, ending up as Minnie Mouse's cat. Black Disney fans have even started a trend of making fan art of the Sunflower character, removing her offensive attributes, and making her a decent character. If an updated version of Sunflower had a decent role in an episode of House of Mouse, that would go a much farther way to make up for Disney's racist history than just ignoring she ever existed. The Centaur boys come to meet the white centaurettes. They pair up and go on dates, notably ignoring Sunflower. No boyfriend for her. The next scene has them all prepare for a bacchanal, a feast to honor the god of wine Bacchus. They gather grapes and make a lot of wine. Bacchus, in the form of a fat, drunk, giddy white man, rides in on a donkey unicorn called Jackass in a parade. Get it? Because Jackass sounds like jackass? I like to think Bacchus rescued him from Pleasure Island. Sunflower was also in this scene and was edited out. However, Bacchus is also attended by two black centaurettes whose animal bodies are zebras. These characters were never censored. Unlike Sunflower, they are not based off of the caricature, but rather the Nubian warriors believed to be the first Amazons. And there is a degree of respect given to them that is absent from Sunflower. On the other hand, they still have exaggerated racial features, are presented as servants of the white god, and don't have nearly as much presence as Sunflower did. Bacchus gets into drunken fun. The centaurettes flirt with him, and he chases after them to kiss them, but ends up kissing Jackass. It's a common joke where a man tries to kiss a woman and ends up kissing another man. It's not always outright homophobic. Bacchus, Jackass, and onlookers appear to enjoy the drunken whimsy, but it is based on underlying heterosexism, presuming that no man would want to kiss another man. I really hope there comes a time when I can review a Disney film and have that not be the case. And then Zeus shows up with a storm. Like in mythology, he's cruel and wicked, and starts lobbing lightning bolts down at people as fast as Vulcan can make them for him. Maternal figures of a centaurette and the Pegasus mare rescue younger characters from Zeus's onslaught. Zeus harasses Bacchus for a while, before getting tired and going to sleep, and everyone comes out of hiding. After Zeus's storm, the goddess Iris brings a rainbow. She looks pretty in the same manner as the centaurettes, except that she's wearing a dress, which is the rainbow itself. The party starts up again as everyone plays with the rainbow.
Get all
Finally, Apollo sets the sun, and then Morpheus brings the night. Everyone goes to sleep. Mama Pegasus tucks in the babies, while Papa Pegasus watches from some distance away. Diana fires a bow and brings the stars. It's worth noting that the goddesses are all traditional beauties, in the manner of the Centaurettes, while the male gods have forms that represent their distinct characters. At least Diana is plainly mistress of the hunt, with a bow and hunting deer. That's a bit subversive for 1940s femininity, but it is only a brief shot. Good night, Mount Olympus. When we next see you in 1997's Hercules, you will be far less sexist and racist. The next segment is a comedic interpretation of the Dance of the Hours by Amilcare Ponchielli, depicting animals as they perform an operatic ballet and symbolically enact a rape fantasy. The Dance of the Hours is supposed to represent the differing hours of the day, here represented by different animal species, positioning the day in opposition to the night in a manner symbolic of good versus evil. Ostriches represent the morning. These are all female, which you can tell by their bows and eye makeup. As seen with the dinosaurs, characters are assumed to be male by default in the absence of gendered attributes, so the female attributes are exaggerated, or at least female attributes as male cartoonists think of them. At least the mother fish in Pinocchio was subtle. Incidentally, this was the same year that Daisy Duck was introduced, relying on the same characteristics to contrast her from Donald Duck, who doesn't need exaggerated masculine attributes, but they thought Daisy needed the feminine. The ostriches have breakfast and are then phased out by hippo ballerinas, who represent the day. The big joke with them is that they're too massive to be dainty like human ballerinas. It amounts to a fat joke, but at least there's a sense of cuteness as opposed to grotesqueness. It's better than Stromboli. The main hippo, Hyacinth, goes to sleep, and the hippos are phased out with the elephant ballerinas of evening. There's a similar joke with the elephants, but it's just a size joke and not related to them being fat like the hippos. They blow bubbles, and there's a callback to the Arabian dance with a goldfish in one of the bubbles. But the sexualization does not transfer to this differing art style. The elephants blow away in the wind, as elephants often do, leaving the sleeping Hyacinth as the alligators of night enter the scene. The alligators are telegraphed as evil, with capes and tall shadows. The alligators spot Hyacinth and move in predatorily. Their leader, Ben Alligator, yes, that is his actual name, comes in and becomes lustful towards her. Because there are already jokes about alligators wanting to eat her, Ben Alligator's lust connects with his predatory nature and gives him a violent sexual nature, like classic romantic villains such as the Phantom of the Opera and Carmilla. This is all on the level of subtext, but it is there. Sexuality is treated as predatory in the manner of a Twilight or a 50 Shades of Grey kind of fantasy. He scares off the other gators and moves in. She wakes up and is terrified of him as he tries to court/eat her. But she's just playing hard to get, and she flirtatiously dances with him. Then it just becomes chaos as the gators try to eat everyone. Ben and Hyacinth dance, and the stage they're on falls apart. Dance of the Hours is very silly, and I think most kids would be too focused on the dancing animals to read too much into it, but the subtext is there, and most adults would get it to some extent. The historian in the commentary states matter-of-factly that Ben Alligator is lustful, and flirtatiously dances with Hyacinth. I imagine many kids would understand that the gators are trying to eat the animals, and that their predation is intertwined with romantic attraction, even if they don't make the connection that the two are equated. Similar to the Wolfman depicting a man changing into a monster to prey on women, as a metaphor for lustful men trying to rape women, the prevailing mindset of the 1940s was that male sexuality was innately aggressive, so lust and the desire to hunt were equated. They still are to some degree, but that has greatly diminished thanks to second-wave feminist ideology of the 1960s, pushing for appreciation of consensual sex. The mainstream outrage over 50 Shades of Grey, passing off abuse as healthy romance, is a sign that equating male sexuality with aggression is no longer the prevailing perspective. All that said, however, Ben Alligator is still less creepy than the prince in Snow White. The prince is presented as a noble figure, and Snow White is presented as ignorant for first finding him alarming. In contrast, Ben Alligator is roguish from the offset, and Hyacinth liking him is presented as with mature understanding. The prince is also like Donald Trump, violating women's personal spheres, with the narrative backing him up. While Ben Alligator is always a likable rogue, his predatory nature is appreciated on a deeper level as flirtation. The final segment is Night on Bald Mountain by Modest Mussorgsky, followed by Ave Maria by Franz Schubert, depicting the triumph of good over evil. It shows a peaceful German town being victimized by the evil god Chernabog, or the devil, take your pick, as he summons all manner of creatures from hell. Among these are harpies with a flash of nipples. It is interesting that the evil character gets to show their nipples, as opposed to the centaurettes. While it's true that the centaur boys don't show their nipples, it is interesting that the Greek gods do. There are also fire spirits, traditionally feminine in the way of the fairies. Chernabog progressively degrades them into ugly figures with gender-neutral bodies in the manner of the dinosaurs, which is an improvement over the Dance of the Hours animals. And then, Chernabog is interrupted by an Angelus bell. God arrives and stops Chernabog's fun. He huddles up and turns into the shape of Mount Olympus, as churchgoers praise God. I think no one really likes this part. It's not nearly as dramatic as the Chernabog part. And then the movie just ends. We don't return to the concert at all. It's the same problem I have with In a Glass Darkly. By not returning to the higher narrative level, we don't receive closure. We push in, but we don't pop out. I enjoy this movie, but from a feminist perspective, it's a bit of a mess of strict gender roles, rampant racism, the male gaze, and rape culture. I can anticipate the big criticism that people will have about my review. It's the same one I have when I make it. But it's so pretty! It is very pretty. We can definitely appreciate the aesthetics of the film, the same way that we can appreciate the flashy cinematography of KKK recruitment blockbuster The Birth of a Nation and Nazi propaganda film Triumph of the Will. But it would be remiss not to comment on the hateful ideological content. As everyone borrows from the films they admire, our takeaway should consider the aspects that we would not want to reproduce, such as its hateful ideological content. If Walt Disney were as committed to not being a bigot as he was to making an homage to classical music, Fantasia would be even prettier than it already is. Please like, share, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, and send me an email if you want to commission a video review, and click the link below to support me on Patreon. Pledges of $5 or more will earn you a special thank you at the end of each video. Thank you, and please check out my related videos.